All right. Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining our July 3rd Thursday Together series. Today we have Ms. Keri Hobbs. She's the Senior Public Service Associate with Extension 4-H with the University of Georgia, Cooperative Extension. Uh, she has began her extension career back in 2007, excuse me, as the Sumter County 4-H agent. So she understands all what we go through as 4-H agents. But later, with the Jackson County 4-H, again, a part of the University of Georgia, she was promoted to Jackson County Extension Coordinator in 2014 and to her current position in 2015. In this current role, she works with personnel in 159 counties and five 4-H facilities to create and deliver resources for volunteer leadership and coordination for the corps for the Corps of more than 5,400 volunteers. That's a lot. Ms. Hobbs is a graduate of the UGA Facility Academy, the UGA Public Service and Outreach, Scholarship Academy, and the Vivian Fisher PSO Leadership Academy. So, without further ado, I'm going to let Miss Keri Hobbs take it away and share all her expertise as it relates to volunteer leadership.
Thank you so much, Erica, and what a pleasure to be here with you all virtually this afternoon. It's always fun to talk about volunteer success and especially fun to share with new partners and friends. Um, Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about patterns of success and talking a little bit about the strategy for how we prepare 4-H volunteers to work with young people and to support extension programs um, with extension. It all, in my mind, starts with the hockey stick. And this might sound bizarre because it rarely snows where I am down in Georgia. And I'm actually a native of South Georgia where it really does not snow. So um, the hockey stick is not necessarily a tool that I grew up playing with. However, I have seen that it applies to lots of things in life, including things such as volunteer preparedness. So professionally, the hockey stick can bring us trends and show us patterns. Anybody heard of the hockey stick before? Hockey stick approach? A new idea? I love a new idea. Okay. So when you think about the hockey stick, you'll first want to think, uh-oh, sorry, I'm going backwards. You'll first want to think about the handle. On the handle, as you think about this new idea that you might have, um, at the handle there is not a lot of success that's seen, right? So you have this idea such as a volunteer program, and you don't necessarily see what the results of that program are going to be in that moment. So I'll give you another example, would be gardening, for instance. Um, I just this year actually started as a first time gardener. I had the idea that I wanted the garden in my backyard, right? But those seeds planted in the ground did not instantly bring success, right? The success was unseen. And sometimes this actually could be a little painful, right? As I saw maybe some bugs coming along in my garden or some deer and rabbits like to eat lots of my garden, right? So there were some painful times as I saw the fruits of my labor perhaps um, gone to be actually the foods for these animals. And we may feel that same way in our volunteer programs, right? We have this great idea, but we do not see the success, and it feels painful in the moment whenever we are not seeing success from it. However, we have this conviction, something happens, and we have this conviction that we know it's going to work, right? So, in the case of my garden, I knew it was going to work because my neighbor has a garden. My neighbor can have tomatoes in her garden. I should be able to have tomatoes in my garden. I'm just the property line to the side, right? So I know that they will grow in ground in my neighborhood, and there has to be a way that some of them can survive the deer and the rabbits and the possums. Um, Same as with our volunteer programs, we have this conviction, right? Perhaps we see one volunteer who does this amazing thing, creates some wonderful impact, and we're convicted that we could have lots of volunteers who do that same thing simultaneously and develop a volunteer program that makes a significant difference within our communities. So this conviction is brings about this unreasonable certainty of fulfillment of that end goal. So I now know without a doubt that this can happen. I've seen the instance where it happens, right? So you could also think about the successful 4-H volunteer or 4-H youth program that you want to build. When you see that first young person who reaches success, that first young person who is beyond ready for their future employment, you begin to get a glimpse of what it could be if all the young people in your community are beyond ready, for instance. So now you have that conviction that it could happen. Your goal is down here at the end of the hockey stick. That's where you see what the success looks like, right? So you're visualizing the success. You dreamed about this goal, about this plan, and for just a quick moment, you had a glimpse of what success could look like. You see the progress in the distance. You can see it coming. You consider what happened in that instance where that young person was successful or where that volunteer did something really great. What worked and how could I replicate that? How could it be done again? And that is where you actually move into the third phase of the hockey stick, where you're developing patterns of success. And these patterns are what are going to eventually get you then to your goal, is the repetition of that thing that happened time and time and time again. And in addition to that is going back and looking at what are some additional patterns that will help me reach my goal. So using the gardening example, going back to the beginning, I planted my seeds. It was painful whenever the little seedlings came up, and then they were instantly eaten by the wildlife in the area. I had a conviction though that I knew that it could work because my neighbor had tomatoes, and I realized that maybe what I needed to do is put a net over my tomatoes, perhaps, or maybe plant some basil and some marigolds with my tomatoes, right? So I did that. I started seeing success. I evaluated what worked. And now, next time, guess what? I might actually plant some lavender as well because I have found that co-planting with my tomatoes keeps some of the pests and the animals away. And I am on my way to having that now successful garden, which is what my star is. So thinking about your volunteer program, you have the idea there is a going to be a volunteer program. And until you see progress, it can be really painful. And that's where burnout can also happen, right? You know you need a volunteer program. You're trying to get a volunteer program started. You're not seeing any of that success. And therefore, you can't get to this place where you have patterns that can be replicated. This is where you need to look hard at streamlining or taking a look at what are systems that could help you be successful. And you might look to other programs that have successful programs, such as me looking at my neighbor and asking her what she did with her tomatoes, in order to get your program to a place where you have some progress that could be replicated. After you get these patterns of success, you'll want to come back to where this bell is and plant the cues in your calendar as to when these patterns should take place. And that is truly how I would say the volunteer program can start developing this automation on not only your calendar, but also you're inviting other people to be a part of your team, where you're able to then grow to new impacts. So thinking again of my garden, I got that first tomato. I had conviction now that other things can grow there, right? And so what worked? Well, I watered the plants. I added some marigold. I added that lavender and that basil. Now I think I'm going to replicate that and maybe grow some cucumbers, or maybe I'm going to add then some bell peppers to grow alongside of it, or okra. So then I can get to my star at the top of being able to perhaps eat fresh out of my garden at home. So thinking back to the volunteer program, how can some of our approaches feel like they're seamless on our calendar, right? We get the cue, maybe, or design the cue. Maybe that cue is an invitation that you've already sent out to volunteers to have an orientation, and those volunteers are going to help you be the leaders of that orientation, right? Or perhaps the cue is an email reminder to yourself. Oftentimes, my cues are the calendar invitation where I program the note of what my to do is to be the start of that pattern. So, thinking about those patterns, we want to consider who has a good pattern, because if you're ever going to get out of the state of pain, or there's that burnout in the volunteer program, to get to success, you've got to find some patterns that are going to work. So I would encourage you to look at not only other programs, but other organizations and other companies to seek who has a good pattern. So I want you to think about that. Who would you say has a good pattern? And after you find that maybe company or organization, I want to know, what is it that they do that you think is really good? Like, what makes them stand out to you?
I think I've got one.
You got one?
I think
What do you
so.
think, Erica?
So, and this is from the user side. So I'm thinking about a company like Apple, and in terms of just the using the cell, oh, you can't see, but using my cell phone, in terms of, anything that I need, it's there. They're consistent is what, that's something that's something reliable for me. Anytime that I need to send an email or to handle business in any capacity, like I know what I'm getting each time, no matter what phone I get when I upgrade, even down to the like customer service help and things like that. That's what I thought about when you mentioned um, pattern,
Yeah, I love
good
that you
pattern.
stated reliable and consistent,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so maybe looking at an organization like them, to consider what is it that they do that makes me feel that way, right?
right, right,
What have they designed to help me feel like they're reliable?
right,
And is that a system that I could create for my program,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Anybody else think of an example of who has a good pattern,
Um,
Kim?
I guess I'll do one from we had the Military Partnership Leadership Academy, and we had a speaker, James Laughlin. And one good thing is not only the book is you can sign up for like monthly reminders. So you know how you do a conference and you're like, oh, I'll go back to read that, or I got to remember with the email messages you get, it kind of helps keep you on task. Like, oh, that's right, I was going to do that, or I was going to reach out. It kind of makes you not only get new knowledge sometimes as tidbits, but like refocus on, what you were learning and what you had planned to do. Because oftentimes we put it on the back burner when we come back because there's so many things to do, but keep us moving forward.
Yeah, that's great. And I would imagine that since he has planned for those to be newsletters out, probably he's got them scheduled. Did you say monthly, or was that just going on in my head?
I'd have to go back, but I think it's monthly. And I know it's not very often. It might not be set, but he does send them regularly.
Yeah. So having some kind of repetition, such as monthly or maybe it's quarterly, and again, putting those cues in to remind you as the practitioner or coordinator of, when would it be time to then design the newsletter to go out, right? So then it's expected and it's reliable from the user perspective. That's a great example. Oftentimes think of a fast food establishment that we have here in town. And what keeps me going back there, I actually, if you knew much about me, you would know I really don't eat a lot of fast food. But I will load up and go to this place in a minute. And the reason is because I know that within 5 minutes of placing my order, I'm going to have it. And it's always going to be consistently great. It's going to be exactly what I ordered. And I feel comfortable taking the bag and walking outside of the store without double checking the contents inside, right? I have faith that that company is giving me what I ordered and that it's warm and it is actually the correct amount of things because they have proven to me time and time again that they're consistently accurate, right? And so when I have just this finite amount of time to enter, collect my food, and get lunch taken care of, I know that that's a place I can always depend on to get a very quick lunch where I'm not going to wait a long time in a drive-through line, for instance. So I think about them and what are the things that they do to consistently deliver, right? I keep going back to them time and time again. If I ever think I'm going to get fast food, it's always them. And the reason is because I know I'll get it quickly and I know it's going to be good and it's going to be just like the last time. It's very consistent. I think really what that comes down to is it's meeting my expectation, which is that it was perhaps the same as it was just time before, right? So it's very systematic. Steve, is there anything else or anything you want to add related to someone who has a good pattern?
No, nothing. I can't pinpoint a specific organization or anything that comes to mind. Just I think in terms of patterns, some of the things that are already mentioned. And I know working with volunteers, for example, I know like you touched on expectations. And so when volunteers, and we know this from the literature that when volunteers' expectations are not met, that's one of the reasons for attrition in volunteerism is they'll drop out or they will become disengaged. So yeah, I think you're touching on some really important aspects, especially around expectations and quality and consistency,
Thank you. And you're hitting the nail on the head. Those good patterns that we look at should be setting us up for maintaining consistency with our volunteers and hopefully meeting their expectations so they will be retained in our programs versus us being in this pattern of consistently replacing them, right? So the question then becomes, how do we establish good patterns with volunteerism? How do we look at these other programs and the things they're doing wildly successfully and make it work for us so that our volunteers want to come back to serve with our organization time and time again? We can also consider what are the things that are going to be essential to our pattern if we were starting a new pattern? And one thing that we should look to as it relates to a pattern is going back to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It sounds pretty basic and to go back to this, but truly, if you're missing the basic needs, you've missed the whole boat with volunteers. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of course, has those basic needs of having access to food, water, shelter, and even sleep. Moving up to safety, where they feel secure, they feel healthy, and they feel safe in their environment. And then only after that can they move into this place where they feel love and belonging, where they can acquire meaningful relationships and connections. Certainly, we can foster that within our volunteer programs. Moving up to then esteem, that acquired confidence and skills that can lead to accomplishment, where they can then meet that self-actualization where they have reached their full potential. My hope is that we're naturally creating these opportunities to reach full potential through our volunteer program. So not only are 4-H volunteers serving to meet the needs of our young people, but perhaps they're also building themselves while creating networks of friends and connections, building their competencies, and also feeling like they're reaching their full potential as well. So diving into this just a little bit deeper and looking at how it applies to volunteerism, we'll want to look at supporting needs as it relates to logistics and schedules with our orientations. So considering even when is the time of the orientation or the training, is food and water included, and did you share with volunteers or volunteer applicants who may be introduced to your program for the first time that food and water are included? And if you ever included it the first time, remember that piece of consistency. You're been including it every time, right? So perhaps you have the cooler that's going to be available for water at your pleasure. And if you introduce that concept, it might be one that then is expected for every time. Oh, she's going to have the cooler that's full of water over on the side when you enter, right? So consider maybe some of those hospitable welcoming pieces for your orientations and trainings. Also consider your location and the convenience of the location for the participants who are attending. Also, is it overnight, and have you shared lodging accommodations? Is it a drivable distance? And if not, have you considered, moving it to a webinar meeting perhaps? And are there breaks built in and quiet hours considered just to meet those basic needs? Moving on to supporting those safety needs, again, the location, do they feel safe in that location? Do you feel safe in that location? Do you have a first aid kit and an AED at that location? How close are you to the nearest medical facilities? And can you share that back out with the participants at the beginning of the session so that they know you've considered those things and can put that safety element to rest? Do you have an emergency plan ready to go? So if you're meeting outside, do you have alternate plans for a quick relocation indoors if a storm arises? And can you quickly share out these emergency plans if needed? Have you considered the accessibility of the training and orientation? So perhaps calling for any specific needs in advance of that training that is offered so that you can offer accommodations as they are reasonable to that program. And of course, consider your youth protection procedures and trainings, not only sharing those procedures and trainings with the volunteers, but also being sure that you're sharing the full expectations of your program so that there are no surprises to them along the way, right? Because the thing that I hear that's really I feel like there's nothing worse is when a volunteer who maybe has become maybe on the not good list, and maybe they're looking at releasing a volunteer for some action that maybe happened, and the volunteer was never made aware that that was an action that was not allowed within our program. So it's only fair to have open communication, share the full expectations of the university and our programs, while also hearing those expectations that the volunteers have as well, so that there's maybe a mutual respect in meeting those expectations. A really big one with volunteer programs is supporting the element belonging. So as you're designing orientations and trainings, of course, have those welcoming introductions, not only of yourself, but take the time to ask volunteers to introduce themselves, learn a little bit about why they're there, and what they're hoping to get from the program. You might learn a fun fact or something from them as well. Consider icebreakers in the beginning. I love things like having icebreakers where individuals might tell 3 facts about themselves. Only one is not a true fact. It's false, and the group can then decide which is not the true thing about them, because it allows people to maybe share things that are really interesting about them that you might not otherwise know. There are lots of icebreakers that can be utilized, and I would encourage you to maybe even change them up so that volunteers can see different icebreakers from time to time, because then maybe they'll model some of that variety of icebreakers with the young people that they then work with in the future. Of course, nothing says belonging like shirts and name tags, right? So getting those shirts and name tags for volunteers, but also making sure that you have shirts in everybody's size is available, so that they can feel like they're then a part of the team. Taking photos, not just of 2 volunteers, but the full collection of volunteers who are at the training. Maybe posting that on social media, giving them a big congratulations for completing that orientation or training. A sense of belonging that you could establish is having connections through social media accounts, like you may consider a volunteer page or group through social media, where volunteers could interact and ask questions of other volunteers who maybe have had similar experiences. During your trainings and orientations, consider breaks that are a little extended to weave in some of that networking time where they can foster relationships with each other, and hopefully that begins to support that sense of belonging within your programs. Of course, coordinators could ask volunteers, and should ask volunteers, for their input as they're developing new projects and programs. Volunteers then could feel that sense of self-worth, because and that sense of belonging, because their opinion was asked. And certainly communication, while communication is last on the list, I think it's maybe even the most important with developing that relationship and that sense of belonging. And I want to share a little bit about the communication richness theory, because what we know about the communication richness theory is that if practitioners get this right, if they apply the communication richness theory correctly, their audience then can be satisfied with the message and perhaps complete the task. But coordinators and managers who use the wrong communication for actions are less likely to be successful. So let's dig in a little bit to the communication richness theory. What exactly is it? The media richness theory says that task performance will be improved when task information processing requirements are matched with a medium's ability to convey information richness. So, what does that mean exactly? To break it down, much simpler terms, think about this. Which would you choose? Because there kind of is a right and wrong answer to this one. If the building is on fire, I'll contact the fire department by, is it email, postal mail, social media, a phone call, or in-person communication? What would be your preference for that?
Oh,
Yeah, that phone call, right?
oh my
Duh,
God.
it's the phone call. Sometimes volunteers may be thinking, why are they calling this meeting when it should be a phone call, right? Or why are they sending this email when it should be a meeting, right? So sometimes it's really important to understand the nuances of that item that we're trying to communicate to make sure that we're selecting the correct medium. Here's another example. For marital engagement, I want to be contacted by, or you want to contact by, is it email, social media, text message, a phone call, or in-person communication? You have a preference.
It
What do you,
depends
what,
on, yeah.
What's
sorry, what
that?
do you mean by marital engagement?
If someone is asking you to marry them,
Oh,
Oh, okay. I thought it was an announcement.
or like, yeah.
so would you want them to propose through email, through social media, through a text message, through a phone call, or through in-person communication? What do you think?
In person.
Depends if it's a yes or a no.
Yeah. So this is where you start getting into some iffiness, right? I've had some people say, "Oh, I definitely want that in email because I need it in writing." Um, yes, and maybe it's where it depends, right? Most of the time in that case, you're going to hear that the preference is in-person communication. Okay, what about when offered a job? Which way would you like to be contacted? By email, postal mail, text message, phone call, or in-person communication?
Email.
Email or phone call for me. Yeah.
Okay. Kim, are you thinking the same thing? Email or a phone call?
Well, if I applied for it, I would say phone call,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
probably.
This is where whenever I ask a full, group of 50 people what their preference is, um, most are going to say they want a phone call, but I start seeing some of those people say they really want it in writing. So it might be a yes and they don't mind the phone call, but please also send me a postal mail that has your signature on it, and I would love the email to follow that. um, so sometimes the answer is it depends. How about this one? When I get dates to add to my calendar for the year, how do you want to be contacted? By email, postal mail, text message, phone call, or in-person communication?
I would say email because a lot of times you can easily update them to your calendar.
I agree.
I think email as well, right? Because email feels much more efficient to me. However, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a meeting where it's been like save this date, and this date through verbal communication, right? So um, some people have preferences for what they want through this, but sometimes your preferences aren't met, right? And that may be frustrating to the group. I'm not saying I'm necessarily frustrated by that. I'm just trying to maybe give an example of what could happen. All right. So again, which would you choose? When I need to register for a conference, I want to be contacted by email, postal mail, text message, phone call, or in-person communication?
Definitely email.
Yeah.
Yeah, email and clickable link with that, right? So that I can register. So if the conference spent the money to send me a postal mail, it would be a waste of their resources, right? Because truly they could send me an email and that would meet my preference. So anyone ever felt like this? If I could just send an email instead of calling another meeting, if you could do that, that'd be great. I have a colleague who likes funny memes, so it's got me on a hunt for funny memes about things. Um, anyway, I can't tell you the number of times when I have heard things like, this should have been an email, or maybe this should be a meeting that's coming over email because it has so much email traffic has come because of it. This is because within media richness, a lean medium can be sufficient. It is sufficient for routine communication, but rich communication is needed to resolve. So what does that mean exactly? A lean medium might be a medium such as email, for instance. It's one-way communication. You're only getting the text. It's going to require you to read. And for things that are routine, like sharing out dates, save the dates is not a new thing. It's something that happened last year, and I'm telling you the date again for this year. That would be sufficient for that type of communication, right? But then if there is, let's say if conflict is involved and there is a need for negotiation, then a richer communication would need to take place. So that richer communication would typically be in person, or it could be through a webinar or meeting such as Zoom, because that rich communication is going to come from being able to articulate your thoughts, being able to see the expressions that also come with that, and being able to then negotiate and converse in real time as well. So why does all this matter for volunteer belonging? It's really because if we're communicating with volunteers in the wrong way, they perhaps can be dissatisfied with our program, right? So if they're expecting to have a meeting with you and instead you just shoot them a quick offhanded text, that could feel like it's unsatisfactory for you. Also, what we know from studies is that the managers who use communication theories and apply them correctly, so that where they're most in line with the audience and their recipients, they're more likely to be successful. And sometimes this may mean if a communication needs to go out to a group of volunteers, that there are multiple ways, multiple means of contact, right? So that you're making sure that you're then reaching them through the method that they want. So it could be that you're sending emails and you're also advertising something through social media, and you're also sharing announcements in person at events for save the dates, for instance. So moving on now to supporting esteem, some considerations, and I'm sorry that number 3 is smaller. I don't know why that is. The first one is to invite volunteers to enhance their skills and engagement by maybe taking on more things, learning new things, obtaining additional roles. They're more likely to then further develop their esteem. You might consider offering train the trainer sessions where they could start becoming the leader of programs and of clubs, and then offering continuing education sessions as well, where they can continue this learning process where maybe at times they're also becoming the instructor as well, where you might find their passions and their interests. So the third one says ask volunteers to serve in leadership roles. And so finding ways where they can enhance their skills further is then going to further support their esteem in your program. You might also look to the VRKC resources. This is a National 4-H Volunteerism Resource Hub. And I can share this link with you as we close. But it has a bank of resources that could be used for volunteer continuing education and trainings. It could be as small of a session as maybe 5 minutes. You could clip a little piece of it, or you could take the resources and design a whole year's worth of continuing education for volunteers. There are tip sheets that are available, as well as PowerPoint slides that were developed by volunteer specialists across the nation based on a study done of agents across the nation to best understand what the necessary competencies were for 4-H volunteers who are working with minors. So they took the top 6 domains based on that research study and then designed these resources that tell about the expectations of the 4-H program and even share things such as communication and how to better communication approaches with our young people. Moving on now to supporting the self-actualization. Some things that you might consider is to support volunteers with chartering their local clubs. So recognizing that they can be the leader of that club or that program. And of course, this one should be bigger and not smaller, celebrating volunteer success. So when you see that win, make sure that you're telling them that that's a really great thing, giving them that positive reinforcement in hopes that then it could be replicated as well. So you want to, of course, consider at the as you've thought through the Maslow's hierarchy with your programs, what is it that's working? What should be tweaked? How should I change it so that it could be replicated in the future? Understanding, however, that consistency is key. So thinking back to those programs that were successful, I heard that it was dependency, that it's consistency, and that there are no surprises, right? That they are meeting what our expectations are. And ultimately, that's what we want volunteers to think about our programs, right? That it's like clockwork with the approach with our approach to meeting their needs to ultimately help the young people within our programs. So I'll end on just asking you the question, what will be your cue in designing your patterns? So as you think about maybe a new pattern that you could begin for your volunteer program, that pattern may be something as simple as I'm now going to start an icebreaker at the beginning of all of my in-person sessions, right? So you might just identify one thing to change to make it a pattern. And you're really going to be the most successful if you do just start one little tweak, just a 1% turn, and grow from that. So just 1% turn at the time until you get to where you want to go. But what is going to be the cue that brings that along, right? Is it going to be, it's time for me to look at the logistics for the training. This is my cue to then add in my icebreaker, for instance. Or is it going to be something that you need to have accountability for and ask your colleague to help you remember that this is what we're going to do next year, and I'm going to put it on our calendars, and we're all going to see it on our calendars, and somebody's going to remember that this is what we're going to do to kick off this new pattern. I would encourage you, however, to take a look at your program and consider just one pattern that could be adopted. And with that in mind, I'll open the floor to any questions that you have for me.
I have one more of a brainstorming. As we know, times are changing and stuff, and there's such a variety. But does anybody have any suggestions for volunteer like recognition, like items and things that are popular or ways? Because we've done a variety over the years, but always looking for something fresh.
Yeah. I can tell you some things that we have done here, and that's that we've found that volunteers love to get letters from the individuals who they've served. So if you can find 4-Hers who can, or youth who can write letters back to their leader, that's more impactful than me sending them a letter.
Yeah, no, I try to bring cards to every event and try to get, people to at least sign it or write something.
That's right. And then other things are like if you share, their success on social media, sharing them with their young people they impacted. Or if on the reverse side of that, if you celebrate the young people who just won this championship or they just completed this great season, acknowledging who their coach was, right? So then giving accolades to the leadership. I would encourage you to really try to build it into your culture where volunteers are consistently celebrated in some way. So at maybe every event, there's some way that volunteers are recognized.
In our county program or our local newsletter that we send out monthly, we do a volunteer spotlight each month on one of our volunteers. And they can be self-nominated or we can nominate them or, anybody can nominate them, a youth, a parent. And then we just ask them a few questions about their experience and then we put it in the newsletter. And that seems to be enjoyable for a lot of our volunteers.
What a great pattern. That's a wonderful
I
system
find they
in
usually
place.
say, yeah, oh, no, thanks. But they appreciate it when they get it and you see their faces light up. So trying to
That's right.
do something.
In Missouri, the last Volunteer Appreciation Week, we had our state volunteer advisory committee. I helped them to develop certificates, volunteer appreciation certificates, and they delivered them to their peers at their club meetings. And that went over really well. I wasn't expecting it to be that big a deal, but they really appreciated that. It went over really well. So
Yeah, that's great.
And I would say, as a volunteer myself with Georgia 4-H, I appreciate just getting invitations to be present to some of the kids' activities and things like that. That's always a fun experience for me. A, a way to celebrate or just to acknowledge that, again, myself and even some of my peers that do volunteer, that they're thinking of us enough to say, hey, we have this event or function happening. We would love for your presence, or we would love for you to come in. So that's my 2 cents. Yeah.
That's great. And Kim, I would also say the approach really should be multifaceted in that it recognizes that individuals like different things and feel appreciated in different ways. So, and what I mean by that is some might appreciate something tangible. Others are going to want to be recognized publicly. Others are not going to want to be recognized publicly. And some might want the invitation to the things that you're doing, right? Where others maybe just want you to say thank you to them, more individually. And what I've found is maybe including as many of those as you can in hopes that you're hitting the appreciation needs of the volunteers.
I found a bumblebee brooch with a pearl on it, actually wore to a banquet, and I told the volunteers, look, I wore this just for you.
And so having a volunteer awards program is also a great suggestion. So we celebrate as many as 16 volunteers across the state annually in December through a statewide volunteer dinner that's held at Rock Eagle 4-H Center. And volunteers across the state can be nominated for that celebration and recognition. What other questions do you have?
Have a good night.
Yeah.
Have a good weekend. Did you hear me?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you want to see.
I'll tell you that it's been great to spend this time with you this afternoon. And what I know is that as we prepare volunteers through deep consideration of their needs, they're more likely to then model that with the young people. If we talk with them maybe about some of our strategies related to communication and why we select different communication methods at different times, they may also consider that when working with their young people. Ultimately, as we build relationships with those volunteers, I think they're more likely then to stay in our program, stay engaged in our program, and ultimately, all this is helping them help us to build these patterns of success. But we might also then teach them about our patterns of success and ask them how they might be able to help us even create additional patterns to broaden our horizons.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Keri. Stephen, were you about to say something?
Oh, no.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you again so much for sharing all that you shared about volunteering within our different organizations. It was very useful. This video for you all will be available later today on our website, and I'll also post it again on our Facebook page for those that want to watch it that may have missed it. And don't forget, August 20th will be our last third Thursday of the year. Well, of this season, I'll say that. This grant cycle, Storytelling as Pedagogy, Practical Tools for Youth Practitioners with Dr. Gonzalez. Okay. Thank y'all so much. And it looks like Keri has posted a link in the chat, so you all can copy and paste that. And Keri, I'll also attach that to the video on the website as well.
Sounds
Okay.
great. I've put in the chat box the link to the VRKC resources, as well as an example of some of our volunteer trainings that are available for the public side.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you guys again. I appreciate you so much for being here. Keri, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Thank you all.
Thank you.